Oh, whew, okay. Good evening, everybody. It's been the hottest day of the year here in the UK. It was in the mid 20s degrees Celsius. That's in the high 80s, low 90s Fahrenheit if you're from the US. A little bit of housekeeping because obviously we've got a lot of newer subscribers since the last live stream. In fact, the subscription rate has well up on last month, over 300% higher than last month. We've reached a couple of milestones in the last month or so. So basically, you've got to be a subscriber to leave anything in the chat. You've got to be subscribed for, I think, 20 minutes, I've said it as. And that's basically just to help the moderators a little bit, keep the idiots out the chat, like the spam and the trolls out the chat. So I do appreciate people's understanding. So if you want to get a question in, feel free to do so. The channel at the moment, for those newer subscribers, hasn't reached the monetization threshold for memberships and super chats. So sadly, you can't leave a super chat, but that should hopefully come in time. So there we go. So let's crack on, shall we? Today in the Premier League, Burnley are officially relegated. They cannot stay up. So they went down, I think, 2-1 to Spurs. In reality, Luton are relegated, but in theory, something magical could happen on the last day of the season. And Nottingham Forest concede many, many goals. Not likely. The goal difference is too great, I think, for Luton in the last day of the season to pull off a ridiculous scoreline and Nottingham Forest to lose by a ridiculous scoreline. Although stranger things have happened. And Everton have withdrawn their appeal from their latest points deduction. And we could see that coming from a mile off. We don't know yet what's happening with the Man City charges, all 115 of them. Most likely at some point next season, we'll find out what's happening with Manchester City and the investigation by the Premier League and the FA into them. But so that's sort of the Premier League side of things. The double IHF World Championships have now got underway in the Czech Republic. Canada unconvincingly winning 4-2 against GB. So that was a surprise result. Not expecting that. I was expecting more of a one-sided scoreline. So, but this isn't necessarily the strongest Canadian team that's ever taken to the ice in the World Championships, even though they are defending world champions. So we'll see how that plays out. Also, I've managed to book off some time off work, so I will be covering the group stages, hopefully watching the majority of the group stages matches in the Euros next month. So that's something to look forward to. Also, yes, resumed the club history series in recent weeks. And we were looking at some, I wouldn't say more obscure German clubs, but some of those German clubs that are ex-Bundesliga clubs that are currently in Bundesliga 2, so the second tier. There's some real interesting clubs down there. I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole in regards to the clubs I was looking at. I was going to do a video on Fortuna Düsseldorf, and I ended up looking at some other clubs that just came up in research. Fortuna Düsseldorf is coming, and I'm also going to start looking at some of the clubs in the Greek league, because Olympiacos have obviously made a European final, and so that's kind of interesting to look at that as well, considering that one of the European finals actually is in Athens as well. So going to be interesting. The Bayer Leverkusen Olympiacos final, for example, really interesting, taking place in Athens, and of course one of the biggest Greek clubs has made that final. Also, no English clubs have made any of the European finals this season. Aston Villa were the last club standing, and they went out rather meekly to Olympiacos. Yeah, it's by law you get annual holiday pay, so I don't miss out on any pay. I just get my flat daily rate, no overtime. But so yes, by employment law in the UK, unless you're self-employed, you do obviously get annual leave, or on a 0 hours contract. I think if you're self-employed, obviously you've got to earn enough money to take some time off, and if you're on a 0 hours contract, it's a bit more complicated. But there's legislation to change that, I think, in the pipeline at some point. It's a grey area with 0 hours contracts, but if you are paid an hourly rate and you are contracted to X amount of hours per week, and it's not 0 hours, and you've actually got hourly contracted hours, as in a certain number of minimum hours per week, then yes, you do get annual leave and pay for it. This isn't the US, by the way. This is Europe we live in, please. We have employment rights. So yes, I do get holiday pay. It's the days I take off are set as standard days with no overtime. So I get 8 hours pay contracted per day. And I've taken 10 working days off. So that's 80 hours worth of pay that I would have required in theory. So I've only got 5 working days left, plus I gain days for working bank holidays. So how many more bank holidays are left to take? 1, 2, 3. I think I've got 3, possibly 4 bank holidays left before the holiday year restarts in April next year. So I've got, I would say, about 8 days, 7, 8 days in total left. I think it's 8, something like that. 7 to 8, maybe 9 days left to take. But we'll see. It depends when Christmas and Easter falls as well, and what. And when all that is. Although I had 1 extra in lieu day carried over, so I might have had. I think I've got 21 annual leave days this year standard before gaining a few more through working bank holidays and Christmas catch-ups and all that. So I get a standard 20, but because Easter fell late this year and it was right at the end of the holiday year, we couldn't obviously book it, take it, so that gets carried over. It's a weird one. But yeah, company, my contract states I get a minimum of 20, plus I can earn other holiday days as carryovers from previous years and/or working bank holidays and such. I earn a day in lieu back. So I think last year, holiday year, I think it was 25, 24, 25. Basically a full working month worth of holiday. So I think the maximum I can take off at a time is 2 weeks, 14 days. Anything above 14 or 15 days, I have to speak to management. And so I can't just take it all on block, all my days in one go. I mean, I would love to do that, but I'm going to take some time. I think I'm going to book my birthday off. I think this year. I did it last year. I hate working my birthday because work colleagues tend to pull pranks on you. So there is that. But my birthday falls so close to Christmas that it's one of those times of year where it's a pain in the arse to get time off, and it's our busiest time of year, which we've discussed before. Now, obviously, NRL news, the Magic Round is staying in Brisbane for 2 more years. The NRL higher-ups have dropped a hint that they may, at some point in the future, post-2026, potentially look at New Zealand and Auckland at some point for Magic Round. And there's also been rumours circulating that it may go up to tender and go on a rotating basis. So a different city each year gets to host Magic Round. So we'll see how that plays out. But bearing in mind the state government of Queensland pumps in money into Magic Round to allow the event to take place, that means that over 2 million Australian dollars gets pumped into by the state government of Queensland. They at the moment can afford to do Magic Round. New South Wales and Victoria are out. They've got too much debt. South Australia, will they be interested in it, considering the AFL is a bit more popular? And Western Australia with Perth, they've got a lot of money available. They've got less debt, money available, and they've got a lot of high tax receipts, and a lot of people are moving and emigrating to Western Australia, not only from internally in Australia, but around the world for the mining jobs. Yeah, look, I mean, they want to maximise the tickets sold. However, as the league expands, you get that extra match or matches, potentially 2 more matches on Magic Weekend to be played if the league hits 20 teams. Because it's an odd team league at the moment, 1 team has to miss out. Last year it was Newcastle. This year it's the Dragons have the bye week. So it does mean 1 team misses out at the moment, but when we get that 18th team, that's 1 more match, that's more tickets to be sold. And then when 2 more teams join a, say, 20-team league, that's 2 more matches than what's currently played on Magic Weekend. So that 30,000 capacity can be mitigated by having 2 extra games. I would think they would look at the availability of hotel space, amenities, and transport links, and this is why it works quite well in Brisbane at the moment. Although Perth is good, in Perth where all the stadiums are. However, Western Australia and the main population centres in Western Australia are the Perth metro area and those surrounding smaller cities and towns surrounding Perth in that southwestern corner of Western Australia. And it is quite isolated as a major population centre from the rest of the world. So not just Australia, but globally. So it's, again, that logistical side of getting fans there from outside of a location. But saying that, the Queensland government has guaranteed funds for Magic Round for another 2 years, which settles that debate for a while, and we'll see what if other cities decide or other local governments decide to sump up some cash and say that we're willing to spend this much of our budget on um, hosting and preparing to host the event. Obviously, there's plenty of stadiums in Sydney that could do it. You've obviously got plenty of stadiums in Melbourne that could do it, and of course Adelaide and Perth. But it's all about government money. Proposed new stadium in Auckland would be a good pick. Also, yes and no. That's an interesting one. I understand the sentiment behind it. And it is an interesting one, but again, it's whether the local regional government in the Auckland metro area and the government of New Zealand are willing to already recently upgraded stadiums. Bearing in mind, in 2011 they had the Rugby Union World Cup, and they also co-hosted the 2017 Rugby League World Cup. So the stadium infrastructure in New Zealand has already had a lot of investment in the last 15, 20 years put into it. They were very keen to host the upcoming Rugby League World Cup in a couple of years' time, although it looks more likely Australia are going to get it. And I think that's a bit of a mistake. I think they've played safe, but the International Rugby League Board had lost nearly $500 million last year. So I think they're trying to play safe in regards to attendances and making as much money as possible or mitigating any potential losses. I will say this, though, attendance figures are up in the NRL, and viewership figures are doing a lot better than what they were pre-pandemic. So playing safe may have its rewards, considering at the last World Cup here in England, there were a lot of empty seats. Ticket sales weren't as good. The pandemic had a massive impact, and the losses were very noticeable financially. So when organising a tournament like that, it's going to be interesting. And it's also, again, if there's any spare cash floating around in the public sector, private sector can do so much, but the public sector, when it comes to hosting big sporting events, you need that public money behind a proposal to really do it, and whether the New Zealand government and the local government in Auckland, for example, or Christchurch or Wellington or anywhere else in New Zealand has the spare cash to do such a thing would be interesting. And it's whether they actually do have the spare funds available to pump into stadium infrastructure. Do they really need the stadium infrastructure upgrades, considering that they've recently had a lot in New Zealand in recent times? Is an interesting one. We'll see what happens. But as we at the moment, until 2026, staying in Queensland and staying at Suncorp, which is a fantastic stadium. Don't get me wrong, it's a fantastic stadium. I think it's potentially one of the best, alongside a core stadium and the new Parramatta Stadium. They're the three best stadiums, in my opinion, in Australia for rugby league. They're fantastic. The Gold Coast Stadium's pretty good. Seabus Super Stadium in Robina on the Gold Coast is quite good. A smaller version of the other stadiums, as aforementioned. So there's a couple of really good stadiums that are in Australia. They did very well hosting the Women's Football World Cup as well. Again, that infrastructure is there. New South Wales government has obviously spent a lot of money on stadium upgrades like Accor and Parramatta, and going to be, the Penrith build as well, where they do Panther Stadium up. Obviously, Leichhardt misses out. There's a debate around the future of both Campbelltown and Leichhardt, and whether the West Tigers should ultimately end up also in the Parramatta Stadium. I think it's Combank Stadium now. It was Bankwest at one point for sponsorship reasons, but it's basically Parramatta Stadium. And there's been a great debate. I mean, obviously Cronulla and Shark Park, they spent a lot of their own money because they were the only rugby league club in the NRL apart from the Dolphins that owned their own stadium, and they started doing upgrades before the Dolphins were admitted, which I think's worked in Cronulla's favour in the long run. In the short term, there were obviously issues. You think they should the NRL should just announce the locations of the new teams 18, 19 and 20 and stagger their entry over the next 5 years. It's going to be interesting where they end up. I know that much. It's going to be very interesting when the decision's made to bring the 18th team in. I think that's going to be 2026, personally. potentially next year, but we've not really heard a definite answer of what that, where's that team going to be? Is it going to be another Queensland team, another team in New South Wales, Western Australia, New Zealand? There have been some strong hints dropped about the potential of 18 and 19. Potentially all three could come in at the same time. Potentially, they could stagger it. There are other concerns it's going to dilute the product, etc., etc. But I actually think that the quality we have right now is pretty good. The uptake in the women's game has been fantastic as well. I mean, we've got 2 new women's teams joining next year. One of them is a rejoin, so that's the Warriors coming back into the NRLW, and then you've also got Canterbury being a pretty solid side in the New South Wales state competition, and a lot of players who are playing in the NRLW have come through the Canterbury system. So expansion's there. The women's game is expanding. I think with the NRLW expanding by 2 teams, I think the TV companies, it means more viewers for them, and ultimately it means more revenue ultimately for the league. It makes fixturing easier. I can see potentially the next year or two the 18th team being announced. Where we get with the other 2, I don't know. It'll be post 2026 World Cup. It's my thinking behind it. But a staggered entry would make a lot of sense. How they deal with that, and also there's going to be a lot of players off contract in the next year or so. So that's going to be really, really interesting. We're now seeing more NRL teams looking at the Super League, and with the IMG grading criteria and a lot of struggles with the Super League and a lot of talent wanting to get paid. They can earn more in Australia, and with more teams on the horizon joining, and the game going to Vegas, and that the games have been taken to Vegas, and that long-term plan means more revenue and more money. And so there's a lot to consider here. There's a lot going on, but I think the NRL has got to be the driving force behind the international game and the growth of the sport globally. The Super League obviously tried with the Wolfpack and it went horribly wrong. And the Ottawa Races never actually played a game in Canada, and they ended up moving to Cornwall. So just let that sink in. The AFL, I mean, they're looking at Tasmania, so I can't see Tasmania as a market that the NRL is interested in. Obviously, the AFL has its long-term roadmap and plan, but the AFL's got a lot of other problems on its plate right now. That while it's gone quiet on the drugs testing saga and the cover-up side of things, there's been a lot less discussion about what was going on with North Melbourne and all the clubs basically and their drugs testing policy and whether it's fit for purpose. There's a review going to be taking place, I think, next month or the month after, with all the big wigs at the AFL and clubs and in the media will all sit down and thrash out a new illicit drugs policy. I don't think that's really got a bearing on where the NRL decides to place its next team or teams. The AFL is not going to go to New Zealand. The NRL is. So the AFL is not going to go into PNG. The AFL is not going to go into the Pacific Islands. I think potentially there could be growth in New South Wales and Queensland, but I think TV contract money it's going to be interesting. I can see with what Netflix is planning to do. Obviously, the Jake Paul Mike Tyson fight is now going to be classed as a fully professional bout. Netflix wants to get into live sports rights on a more long-term, not just a one-off basis at some point. So the online streaming services could have a part to play in the media rights, but we'll see. Yes, more teams does mean more money. It means more gate receipts as well, more sponsorship. It also means the Players Association, the RLPA, and also the AFLPA as well. The players' unions have more members, and so they want expansion. So it's very interesting. We'll see what happens over the next few years, but I think 2028 is when the AFL is next planning to expand into Tasmania. There's been delays with that. There's been a lot of issues surrounding that, and it's not been as a smooth process as the AFL would like. It's been a bit more complicated. There's obviously been issues with obviously the AFL having a bit of a leadership vacuum with Gil McLaughlin quitting and then sort of hanging around as an interim boss for a year, with what's happening off the field with a lot of negative headlines surrounding the AFL. So the AFL claims it's in a healthy place, but I don't think it's as rosy as it seems on the surface. I think there's a lot of behind the scenes issues and off the field issues with the AFL that are of more concern. A lot of players come from Tasmania. A lot of the players who play in the AFL, there's a very strong state league in Tasmania. It's played very widely. Alongside cricket, they're the two most popular sports in Tasmania, team sports. Some very high-profile AFL players have come from Tassie, as well as cricketers, like obviously Ricky Bunting's a Tasmanian. So rugby league has never had a real strong foothold, but it is quite popular. The two most popular sports are Aussie rules and cricket. I'll have to actually look at the number of players from Tasmania who play in the AFL, but I can't think of any NRL players who've either lived or were born in Tasmania who are currently in the NRL. I can't think of any off the top of my. I mean, in 2003, the Rugby World Cup played some games in Tasmania. They had to play on a cricket oval, so there isn't the four-sided rectangular stadium that you would equate with rugby league, rugby union, football. It just they don't have that kind of infrastructure there. Whereas cricket ovals are the same dimensions of a field that an AFL team would play on. So you can sort of see where the sporting heritage and the sporting interest lies in Tasmania for the team sports. In saying that, Tasmania doesn't really have a massive population. Hobart is the biggest city. It's not a massive city, even by Australian standards. Launceston is the second biggest city, and that's less than half the size of Hobart. It's a very rural state. It's got for states, it's got the lowest population. Yes. Something Cox. It's Cox. Oh God, what's his first name? I'm gonna. Oh God, yeah, he plays for Collingwood. There's a couple. There's a few Irish as well in the main. About 8 or 10 Irish players, and Cox. I forget his first name. Is it Nathan Cox? He plays for Collingwood, and yeah, he was a Texas State basketball player, and he was a bit part player in their squad. But he went to the AFL Combine, got picked up, and now he's one of the best players in the league. I can't remember his first name now. He has a funny nickname. He's had a few. Is it Nathan Cox? I know it's Cox is his surname, and he is ridiculously tall. He's massive. He makes Nelson Asafa Solomona look short. Cox AFL. Mason Cox. There you go. Mason Cox. I think he actually is from Texas. He's 33 years old. Right, let's have a look at this. Wow, he's 33. He's a little bit younger than me by a couple of years, so he hasn't got long left in the game. He'll be retiring at some point in the next few years. He's 33 years old. Mason Cox is an American-Australian professional Aussie rules player who plays for Collingwood. He's a ruckman or a key forward. He played his first game was in 2014. He made his debut in the AFL in 2016. It was Oklahoma State, and he's 6'11". And he's the tallest player ever to be measured at an AFL draft combine. They call him Coxzilla, American Pile Coxie. He's originally from Texas in a place called Highland Village. He played for Oklahoma State, one of the Big 12. He was the number 60 pick overall in the 2015 AFL rookie draft. And he's played 121 games so far for Collingwood, scoring 120 goals. He was the AFL Premiership Player in 2023, and he got the Neil Danier Trophy in 2018. So there we go. That's an interesting one. Thoughts on Spurs intentionally losing against Man City? I wouldn't do it. You want to go out and win every game. And of course, you don't know what's going to happen in the FA Cup final with Manchester United because that could impact European qualification. I mean, no player wants to intentionally lose. Obviously, Arsenal are the Spurs' biggest rivals, but it's Man City obviously have that game in hand. I mean, intentionally losing or tanking or whatever you want to call it, I don't like it anyway. As a Blackburn fan, I can't see any Blackburn player intentionally wanting to lose against Burnley. You wouldn't hear the end of it, and you'll be out the club very, very quickly. And I mean, next season, obviously, Blackburn and Burnley are going to both be in the Championship. Obviously, Burnley got officially relegated today from the Premier League. No, I can't see. I mean, if that comes out as in deliberately, intentionally to losing, I've heard rumours circulating that Spurs may consider intentionally losing against Man City, so Arsenal don't win the league. I mean, there's still an outside possibility they get a European space, and if they actually lose and teams around them win or get a whatever, how the permutations work out, they miss out in Europe. Daniel Levy likes making money. Joe Lewis likes making money. That means losing money. No. Or intentionally losing if it meant Burnley not winning the league. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that, even though I don't like Burnley, and then there's that rivalry there. I don't even think the opposition would. I mean, it's a difficult one. If it meant Burnley not getting promotion or not finishing above us and things like that, I don't like the thought of it. I've never liked the thought of it. I know it happens a lot in North American sports with deliberately tanking to get a better draft pick, and there's rules being brought in to prevent that. It's not a good look for the league, the integrity of the league, the sport. It's not something that I would feel comfortable with personally. I work with a lot of my work colleagues are Spurs fans. A lot of my work colleagues are Arsenal fans. I mean, the banter between all my work colleagues is hilarious. We have a lot of good banter when it comes to football and ripping the shit out of each other. We've got a lot of Chelsea fans, a few Liverpool, a few Man United, but not a single Man City fan works at my workplace. But no, intentionally losing, players go out there to try and win. And put their best performance in, because some of these players, if they have a bad game, there'll be scouts looking at them for potential, international squads for the Euros, potential transfers, like to their next club. They could be going off contract. That could be a match that scouts are at, and if you play badly, for example, that could impact your next contract. There will be ramifications, and if it came out that Spurs deliberately lost a game or some kind of match fix, considering that Manchester City are already under investigation for how many charges, and Spurs have had a really disappointing season, that won't be. I mean, Spurs are going to go out there to win. They're going to want to finish their season on a high, and they're still in the realms of European qualification. And they won today. They want to make a European competition next season. The ownership like making money. To miss out on Europe means making less money. And Postecoglou is under a bit of pressure because of the first half of the season, brilliant. Second half of the season, they've been really poor. So the manager's under a bit of pressure. They haven't won a trophy since 2008. They've had some very disappointing ends to seasons in recent years. 2016 in the running for the Premier League, competing with Leicester, ended up finishing third. They fell away in the last couple of weeks, and they were trading places with Leicester all season. They were the top two. They beat them in the cup, in the FA Cup, yet Leicester end up with the silverware, Spurs end up with nothing. Champions League final ends up with nothing. League Cup final end up with nothing. They've gone through several managers in that time frame, still won nothing. They have spent a fair bit of money. Still, they've had a new stadium built. They've still managed to win nothing. And I think the fans would. I don't know how the Spurs fans would actually feel at this point. I mean, there is that dislike of Arsenal. There is that rivalry there. It's an intense rivalry. Very few players cross the divide. Sol Campbell, I think, is the only one that actually comes to mind. He's played for both clubs, and he copped it in his career for making that move. He really copped it, and fans never forgave him. He copped a lot of abuse. and regularly, and the rivalry between the two clubs, it's long standing. But with all the spotlight on Man City with those charges against them and the investigation against them, and Spurs really faltering in the second half of the season, and fans getting restless. I just don't know how I would feel about my club deliberately not putting in an effort. I really wouldn't. I just don't know how I would feel about that. The problem is Arsenal is the other team in line to win the title on the last day of the season. But if Spurs deliberately don't put an effort in, or it's a favourable result for Man City, there will be a lot of eyebrows raised and a lot of questions asked. And of course, the betting patterns as well. There will be a lot of suspicions raised. And I think it's a complicated one. Obviously, Man City are going to go out and play their best. But I don't know. I don't know how I would feel very uncomfortable if my team were deliberately playing badly to lose and not putting the effort in. I really, I've seen bad performances where players are not trying at sporting events, and fans have called it out. Even if it means you having a bad result means the biggest rivals that your team faces doesn't get, I don't know, promotion or win a title or progress to the next stage of a tournament. I would feel very, very uncomfortable, with. I've been at. I know ice hockey is a different sport, but the team I follow, my local team, they really sucked one night, and there was no effort from the players. They were and they got booed off. Fans actually lobbed their jerseys and season tickets at them. Honestly, I mean, it might only be the second tier British ice hockey, what is now the NIHL, which was formerly the EPL in the English ice hockey, which is below the Elite League, which is the nationwide league. It was the second tier. 3,000 fans booing the team off in an arena like that. And there were some who actually lobbed their season tickets and jerseys at them and said, "You're not fit to wear it, get out." And a few players never played for the team ever again. And yeah, when the home fans are just telling the players that's not good enough, that's not acceptable enough, and booing a team off, yeah, the following season, a lot of players never played for the team again. A lot of players were dropped to the reserves. It was not. It's very rare that I've seen it where players getting booed off at halftime in a football match. I've seen it where ice hockey players are booed off after the first period of play, 3-period game. So I've seen fans turn on a team when they can clearly see that the effort is either poor or they're not trying. And especially the more, I don't know, the more the wage bill is, the higher paid the players are. I think the reaction is justified from fans. So I would think, I'm not sure how. I don't know. I don't know how I would feel about that personally. I have, I've booed my team off before. I have booed my team off before, and I have called it out as not good enough. You go there wanting your team, even if you lose, you want to see effort. So for Spurs to deliberately lose, there would have to basically be no effort, no energy, no commitment. And I just cannot see professional players who are in the spotlight with 30, 40 TV cameras on them, 40, 50,000, 60,000 in a stadium watching them, multiple people on TV and online watching them, to basically deliberately not put any effort in and be half-hearted. A, you're more likely to get injured as well. B, it's going to be so obvious that they're not trying that I have a tough time believing they would do it. But a lot of these rumours have circulated, and it'll be a really bad look for the game. Really bad look for the game. And then it would raise a lot of eyebrows. I want it to go down to the final minute. Both games kick off at the same time, and it's also up to Man City and Arsenal to put performances in, a good performance in as well. So both, you want to win. Even if you lose, you've got to put effort in. And if it's very obvious that Spurs aren't putting the effort in, it's going to be very noticeable, obviously, in the stadium and on TV. And I just can't see it. Okay, Romford and Gateshead. I know Gateshead have obviously been in the headlines for not being allowed to play in the playoffs because of a stadium issue. And I've covered that in a couple of club histories where, clubs have been denied promotion for various reasons. I think Falkirk in Scotland were denied multiple times over, again, stadium issues. I think Gateshead have been treated quite badly, but they rent their stadium, so it's up to the stadium owners to bring it up to Football League standards. I'm not cheering for anyone in the NHL playoffs. Now the Jets are out, I've tuned out. I want to see I think in a perfect world, I would like to see a Vancouver, Florida final, because then we get a brand new name on the Stanley Cup. I think that just that would be a good look for the league. That will get a first time winner. That would be kind of fun. The way Florida are playing, they're most like Florida and the Panthers and the Rangers is going to be the conference final. We can see it from a mile away. That is going to be a series. The way both the Panthers and the Rangers are playing, that's going to be the conference final in the East. The West, it's a bit more up in the air, but the East is looking really tasty as a conference final. But look, the Jets are out, so I've got no one in the fight, and I've sort of tuned out until free agency and the draft. I've tuned out. The draft's going to be interesting, and free agency is going to be interesting, but I've tuned out. I might tomorrow watch a couple of the World Championship games and do a couple of World Championship reviews because they've now started, and Canada barely beat Great Britain today 4-2. I'm really surprised by that result. I have high hopes for the GB team this year to actually stay in the top tier of the World Championships. I think they can do it. Can I imagine how hostile it will be if Spurs beat City? Fans are threatening to invade the pitch if they look. In my opinion, it would be whatever happens. There's going to be some suspicions raised. So if Spurs actually win that game and go for broke and say that we want to put a statement down, not only for this season, so that we finished the season on the high. We won our last few games. We qualified for one of the European competitions, not the Champions League, but the Europa League and the Europa Conference League. They can obviously get a European spot the next season. Also, Man United could beat Man City in the FA Cup final. They cannot rely on Man City winning the League and Cup. They can't. They have to go right, because the ownership will go, look, we need European football next season confirmed. We need to have that European revenue for next season. And if they were to play in the Conference League or Europa League, they could win some silverware, because they're quite a solid side in Europe. They're not no hopers. But if there's pitch invasions and disorder, I mean, again, with the Euros literally about to start, and with what happened at the last Euros at the final, we need to keep these negative images to a minimum. We've seen issues with Millwall and a few other clubs this season. We've seen issues in Scotland this season. The optics look bad when we're going to get a Euros in 2028 as co-hosts. And the behaviour of fans at the Euros final in 2021 wasn't great. So that's just my view on things. But the police presence is going to be big at both games. It's going to be a headache for police forces up and down the country next weekend. You're not expecting the Canucks to win, but it would obviously be cool. Otherwise, I would love to see the Stars win it. Panthers or Rangers in the finals. For me, I would like to see a final with two teams who've never won the cup before. I think that'll be a real positive for the league, and it will say that the salary cap is working. The salary cap is working. But I think the Rangers and Panthers is going to be the conference final. Boston are just getting beat up. The momentum's swung. The Canucks, Oilers, it's going to be difficult for the Canucks, but they're not out of the series yet, but it's starting to look like an uphill struggle. But I'm not sold on the Oilers. Not sold on them. People are going, oh yeah, McDavid and Draisaitl, this is their year, but I'm not sold on them. They can't defend. their goals against is actually quite high. And goaltending, while it's got better, and Chris Knobloch has made the team a bit more balanced with his style of play and his trades that have been made, and how he balances the scoring lines and the shutdown lines and the defence pairings. They still have some issues defensively and in net. And Draisaitl's out for a few games with an injury, so it's going to be interesting. Interesting in my opinion. But no, that's some interesting thoughts there. I think, as I say, I've tuned out of the NHL playoffs since the Jets, completely melted down in the first round. Also, the Maple Leafs, Sheldon Keefe has been sacked, so the Maple Leafs, their playoff woes continue, and that's an ongoing issue that the Maple Leafs, they've got out of the first round once in how many years, and they've only won one game in the second round. They have not performed to expectations, considering the roster they have and the amount of money they're paying their top players. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens at the Maple Leafs. Obviously, last year Carl Dubas loses his job. This year Sheldon Keefe loses his job. So it doesn't matter who's behind the bench and who's in the front office. It's going to be interesting what the Maple Leafs do. Obviously, the Jets are looking for there's a lot of teams looking for new coaches for next season. And then we get to Utah. Formerly the Coyotes, just going to be Utah Hockey Club. They haven't got a name. We don't even know what the logo is going to look like. We don't know what the jersey colours are going to look like. And we don't know what the branding is going to be. They've trademarked a lot of names. I find this surprising. Now, when Atlanta moved to Winnipeg, the Jets, they already had the previous name there. The city had trademarked it, and they went, cool. Now, the logo isn't great. I will admit the Jets logo isn't the best. I think the shoulder patches should be the main logo. I think the flag of Manitoba maybe should be the shoulder patch. That's my opinion. But they had a ready-to-go name, and they were all ready to team colours, ready to go, and bang. In this case, I find it very interesting that they don't have team colours. They don't have a franchise name yet. And we're not going to have any of that for a full season. So really interesting with that. A bit like the PWHL, where it's just, the team name on the front. No nickname. It's just going to be Utah. So that's a little bit disappointing. But their season ticket sales have been really, really good. So they're going to sell out that arena, no problem. There's clearly an interest in ice hockey, or hockey because of the North American audience, in the state of Utah, in Salt Lake City. Obviously, it's hosted the Winter Olympics before. They want to host the Winter Olympics again. I think the problem is, obviously, the failure in Arizona, how quickly it failed and how it fell apart so quickly I think part of that is on the NHL. I think some of the issues that the Coyotes faced is partly on the NHL. I think they mismanaged that situation quite badly. But then again, in the last decade, we're just talking about the last decade, we've had talk about relocating Florida, the Panthers, the Hurricanes, and now there's talk about Buffalo struggling as a market, and that's in a traditional location. And Buffalo suck. They suck. And there's talk around the Buffalo Sabres and what's going to happen there with constantly missing the playoffs, and going through coaches, going through GMs, and not making progress. It's been a very long time since Buffalo have been competitive in the playoffs and making the latter stages of playoffs. They traded away a franchise player in Jack Eichel, who then went on to win a Stanley Cup with the team he was traded to in the Vegas Golden Knights. But there's been concerns with other teams in the past, like the Islanders, Predators. There's been concerns about some of both the Alberta teams in the Oilers and the Flames. And so the fact that Arizona hasn't worked, while it's a shame, I think a lot of the problems actually lie with the NHL. They selected ownership groups who were given the green light to take over, and they've had a lot of issues with ownership. There are fans in Arizona. I think they have been let down, some great players have played for the Coyotes organisation over the years, and people are going to have lost their jobs over this. Arena staff, administrative staff, team shop, all this kind of stuff. People have lost their jobs over the failure of the Coyotes in Arizona. It's just the speed of the failure. But I think once the Tempe deal failed, when that deal actually fell through last year, that I think the discussions were already being had by the league with Ryan Smith and the Utah ownership group that already owns the Utah Jazz about moving the team. I think wheels were put in motion. I think the NHL Board of Governors had lost faith in Maruello to deliver on promises that he was claiming. Also, the leaked renderings gave it away when it said Phoenix rather than Arizona on the leaked renderings. I think that gave it away. But the relationship with the city of Glendale was poor from the outset. The team was struggling to make money. And while it's a big metro area and it's a fast-growing metro area, I think, it's been mismanaged. Same with Atlanta. It was mismanaged in Atlanta as well. Very badly mismanaged in Atlanta. But there's hints that the NHL wants to go back to Atlanta. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. I wouldn't say... but the NHL has said within the next 5 years, if an arena can be built and if they win this land auction, they're going back. So we are going to see further expansion past 32 teams. Whether that's a good or a bad thing with the NHL, we shall wait and see in regards to further expansion and whether it's the right course of action for the league to take. I think 32 works quite well. I can't see any other teams being relocated at this current point. I think that's one of the reasons why Utah was a perfect location for relocation for the Arizona Coyotes. Same division, same conference. Doesn't mean any other teams have to move conference or division. But I am interested at what the speed of expansion is going to be like when the process starts again for the next round of expansion, and how many teams they're going to expand by. Is 36 the next number? Is it going to end up being 40? We'll have to see how that impacts the divisions, how it impacts the conferences, and whether we just go to a 2-conference system or we just get rid of divisions and conferences entirely and end up with a league. There's no perfect solution in regards to how many games per season are going to be played, what the league structure is going to look like. There is no perfect system. But I would assume, now that they've got the Utah-Arizona situation resolved, and we are going to see a new arena in Utah, as the state government has released funds for a new arena, which will also host the NBA. And I said those funds are available. But also Major League Baseball is looking at Utah as well, because there's another ownership group in Utah that wants Major League Baseball, and Major League Baseball is considering expansion once the Oakland A's situation is resolved. So we could see a lot more major sports going to the state of Utah and Salt Lake City as things stand. I mean, there's a lot going on in the major sports world. My hair is a mess. Look at that. I'm Johnny Neutron. Fuck me. So yeah, there's a lot to consider in regards to where major leagues end up and who expands and who relocates. But it's something that's a bit more alien as a concept here in Europe. A bit more alien. It doesn't happen. Obviously, MK Dons being the outlying example of a major sports team moving from Southwest London in Wimbledon, ending up in Milton Keynes, and the reaction to that from English football fans was so resistant to it, and it hasn't been a success, that it's never going to happen again. It's never going to happen again. And then we have the European Super League idea. That's not going away, but it's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Again, the resistance to it. If you can't get your existing fans through the gate or behind the principle, you're not going to get new fans to stick around very long. It's going to be like a curiosity that won't work. But it's going to be interesting to see how the major leagues in North America continue to expansion. The NBA is considering it. The NFL at some point will consider again further growth. And Major League Soccer continues to expand at a ridiculous pace, almost on a yearly basis. And league revenues come into it, TV audience comes into it, and of course, with the US, Canada, and Mexico co-hosting a World Cup in 2 years' time, that's going to bring more revenue into North American soccer, as they would call it, or football to us. And that would again spur a further bout of expansion. So there is a lot to discuss in regards to locations teams go in, league structures, and a whole host of other things. And of course, we started off discussing the NRL and the AFL and in Australia and their expansion or potential expansion and what that will look like. The same could be said right now, obviously, for US sports. Now, do I go for the orange flavour? Do I go for the original? Now, which one of these? I dropped that one, so in the shop, and that nearly exploded on me. So we're going to put that one down for safety reasons, and we'll go for this Lucozade as the next one. But yeah, no, I think we've covered expansion to death. I think now that, as I say, the Coyote situation being relocated to Utah is now sorted, I think now the NHL will, as I say, look at the options and the ownership groups that are interested in an expansion franchise. As I say, Houston's been quite open and vocal about getting a team. Atlanta's been very open and vocal about getting a team. We know that if Maruello and his ownership group can build an arena, that they're going to get a team within the next 5 years. And Quebec doesn't go away. Omaha, Nebraska's come up. Kansas City's come up. So there are locations across the US and Canada that are interested and have declared interest or have been involved in expansion processes before, where there's either an ownership group or arena in place where they're going, look, we can quite happily have an NHL franchise here. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. But there's a lot of money involved. So these owners are going to have very, very deep pockets to be able to afford to have an expansion franchise. And of course, the other owners are going to want that expansion fee money, which is interesting. And I don't know when the next NHL CBA is going to be, but it's going to have impacts on the next CBA in regards to the players wanting to have a share of the expansion fees. And I think the NHLPA would actually not mind expansion because it means more players for the NHLPA, which means more bargaining power with the NHLPA. Also, the NHL would like it because it means more team owners and more money and more revenue and more TV revenue, sponsorships, merchandise sales. So it's in favour of both sides to actually have expansion. Now, whether that weakens the product or strengthens the product, obviously, the quality of play and the quality of player will determine that. But the growth of the sport in the US in the last 30 years, you can't deny the growth of the sport south of the Canadian border. The fact that since the 90s, we've only had now 2 relocations in the last 25 years tells you that the game has stabilised and is in a much healthier position. Whereas before, the NHL in the 70s was competing against the WHA, and teams were going bust all the time, and then the WHA folded. But the players did quite well out of that decade. When the WHA was set up, the players weren't earning a lot of money. When the WHA folds, their salaries have exploded and the players have more power. So while the WHA was annoying to the NHL, ironically, it was good for the players. But 3 out of the 4 surviving WHA franchises ultimately relocated in the following decade and a half. So the franchise stability has been an issue. And one of those franchises relocated twice. So there have been issues in the aftermath of the WHA expansion in 1979 and the merger with the NHL, there have been some issues in regards to the stability of those franchises and the success of those franchises. Apart from the Oilers, the Nordiques become the Colorado Avalanche. All the success comes in Colorado. The Whalers becomes the Hurricanes. All the successes come in Carolina. The Jets become the Coyotes. Now become this Utah insert hockey team name here. No success, no stability. So only and even the Oilers almost got moved a couple of times and have had financial issues and players not wanting to play there and a lack of success at periods. But their first decade in the NHL, they were pretty good. Pretty good is an understatement. I mean, five Stanley Cups, 4 of them with Gretzky, 1 without Gretzky, but 5 Stanley Cups in their first decade in the NHL will tell you that they were a pretty good team, and then they stopped being a successful team because they ran out of money. They couldn't afford the players, and players didn't want to sign there in the end because the ownership just couldn't afford to pay them. And this is pre-salary cap era; they just could not afford players. So the quality of player they were getting was less, and the team was less competitive and less successful. And then they started missing playoffs or becoming less regular in the playoffs. Made 1 Stanley Cup finals since the salary cap era has been in place. But again, they had a lengthy period where they weren't making playoffs and constantly rebuilding. Constantly. And then they get a couple of good players. And they got several good players. And they still can't win. Although now they're getting more consistent in the playoffs again. But individual talent won't get you over the line. You need a team unity and team cohesion. And I think that's another thing they've been lacking is balancing their roster so that they can actually make a Stanley Cup Finals push or win the Stanley Cup. It's been problematic. But it was the same in Florida. Florida make the final very early on in their existence, and then not a lot until recently. So it's not just about location and getting the players in there; it's getting that team to gel, developing draft picks and the up and coming talent in the minor leagues, having the right coach and building the right culture. There's multiple parts. It could be 1 or 2 players just disrupt that locker room. The team chemistry doesn't quite necessarily work because it's a team game. It's a team game. Any team sport, it's the whole roster or squad has to buy in, has to work together, build those combinations. You've got to have depth players you can fill in when players are injured or suspended or unavailable for whatever reason. And the teams that generally win have very deep depth and a certain culture. And you see it with Vegas. Culture right off the bat. These players were basically pissed off at the teams that released them, put them into the expansion draft. They called themselves the Misfits. Now, out of the current roster of the Vegas Golden Knights, there's very few misfits actually left from the original 2017 expansion draft. But there's still a good core there who've been with the team since inception. And, they're the ones who hold all the team appearance records, goal records, points records, even penalty minutes records, because they're the original misfits. But they led the team culture, which is why they're still there. And okay, this year they didn't do well in the playoffs. They were concerned, they're going to have to make some roster changes. They've had a lot of injuries and a lot of disruption to their lineup, but they got it right at the right time last year. And they got it right the first year of existence. They just built a culture from scratch. And they did it in a couple of months, built a culture, went on, a run in the regular season and in the playoffs. And there you go. They built an underdog culture. They didn't make it easy for visiting teams. They used their location, Vegas, as a distraction. The Vegas flu, as they called it. Teams would go there, not play particularly well. They use the bright lights of Vegas as a distraction. They kind of build this psychological warfare. They're a very good team. Opposition fans don't like that. It's seen online. They've only missed the playoffs once in their existence. They've made 2 Stanley Cup Finals and won 1. They've made multiple conference finals in second rounds. So they're doing pretty well for a young team. not making many friends along the way doing it, but they're upsetting the apple cart, which is they've set a standard now for expansion teams in any league, in any pro sport in North America and Australia and New Zealand as an expansion team. They've set a standard now that I don't think many teams can live up to. Seattle obviously made the playoffs in their second season, fell back this season, sacked the coach. Dave Haxtell's gone. So Seattle found it a bit tougher to replicate what Vegas did in that first season. It took them 2 seasons to make the playoffs. And they made a pretty decent fist in their second season in the playoffs. And then in their third season, they missed the playoffs again and had a poor season. And the coach is gone. And they did make some bad decisions in regards to trades, drafts, and free agency as well. So there's a bit of pressure on the GM to fit, turn things around in the next two or three seasons. And if they don't get back to the playoffs or get more competitive and closer to the playoffs, I think potentially we could see head office, front office changes with the Seattle Kraken. So there's that. In regards to the NRL, let's just go back to Australia. South Sydney. Their disappointing start to the season continues. They lost to the Dragons and they just fell away in the second half. Latrell Mitchell again had a mixed game, scores 2 tries, but otherwise he didn't have an impact on the game that was positive. Trying conditions, but they're falling apart. Ben Hornby's got a tough job as interim coach. Obviously, the Wayne Bennett discussion's not going away. I don't think that's going to help Ben Hornby's case in regards to installing team unity and discipline when he's been openly undermined by, he knows he's not going to be in a job basically beyond the end of this season. That's got to prove to be a distraction. I wouldn't like that. Basically told you're only here for 6 months, then you're gone. So it doesn't matter. I mean, South Sydney are in complete and utter meltdown. It's their worst ever start to a season. And they're the first team to concede 28 points or more in the first 10 rounds or something. At least 9 times, I think, or 8 times. Out of the games they played, there's only one game where they conceded less than 28 points, and that was the victory over the Bulldogs. Every other game, they have conceded 28 points or more, which no team has done since university in 1920, the university team. So out of all the teams in the NRL, including the Dolphins, they had the worst start to a season ever. Or tied with the university team that doesn't exist anymore. They have the worst record defensively of all time. They make the Western Magpies of 98 and 99 look competent defensively. If they continue at this rate of points leakage, they are potentially going to concede more points than the Western Suburb Magpies of 98 and 99. This could be the worst ever defensive display by a team I've ever seen. I mean, and West's actually won some games in those 2 final seasons as a standalone club before the merger with Balmain, and they were shit. The points against average is going up every game they play, and they just look a mess. There's no defensive cohesion. The effort's lacking. They look tired. They look severely unfit. The defensive energy. I mean, there were periods against the Dragons today where they looked better. They looked more committed to the cause. They had a bit more energy about them in attack and defence. And then there were periods where, you've got to ask the question about their middles, their outside backs, and just the defensive system and the commitment. And the commitment to basically show some fight. There's not a lot of fight there. They are leaking points at an alarming rate. And the only time they haven't conceded 28 points, they conceded 16, which is not bad, but they only scored 20. So they're not scoring enough points either. They've got the worst defence and they've got a real struggling attack. They are starting to look bad, really bad. They're not looking great. It is concerning. And I think some of these players just don't want to be there anymore. They look disinterested. Morale looks like it's gone. There's clearly things happening behind closed doors that we're not privy to, but you can see that they're not a united team. There's a lot of... You can see that within that squad, it's a divided squad. Maybe little groups, maybe two groups. I don't know what's going on there. There's been a lot of reports about Cody Walker and Latrell Mitchell getting preferential treatment under Demetriou. There's been a lot of reports of a division in the dressing room between Cody Walker and Latrell Mitchell and everyone else. But this seems to be a very disunited squad, a very unfit squad. They were out on their feet with about 25 minutes left in the game today. Something has gone wrong in the off season and the preseason for the situation to be this bad. In all my time, even when the Newcastle Knights were having their 3 straight wooden spoons, at least you could see there was effort to try and there was commitment, even if they were getting battered every week. There was a lot of games they were actually quite close in scoreline, but you could see with the Knights they were trying. They were up for the fight and they were just giving it everything, and they just weren't good enough on the day, and they were really going through a low spell. But this South Sydney team just looks crap. And they've got some good players on their roster. This is not like a wooden spoon roster. These are origin players. These are internationals. These are players who played in grand finals, won grand finals, been man of the match in grand. These are really, really good players who represent their state and their countries at representative level. And they look just disunited, individualistic, unfit, unmotivated. I'm going to have to do another video on South Sydney, looking at how bad it's gone and compare it to the Western Suburb Magpies, because even the Magpies showed a bit more fight than that. This is diabolical. This is diabolical. I've not seen a South Sydney side this bad ever, and I've seen some bad sides take the field in rugby league. I've seen some really bad teams take the field, but comparing them to the Titans are showing fight. And they've got a brand new coach, so they've got to give Des Hasler top. The Titans are showing fight. South Sydney are they've just surrendered. And they are in trouble. Big, big trouble. I don't know how they fix things. But it's not looking good. Not looking good at all. And with Magic Round next weekend, this could be a really, really interesting week for the team. It's going to be a very interesting week for the South Sydney Rabbitohs. It's going to be very, very interesting to see, what if there's any changes made. Are players going to be dropped again? I mean, there's issues with the halves. They've got injuries, which doesn't help. But will players be dropped? Will positional changes take place? We'll see. Potentially, the Northern Lights could be happening tonight, so I might actually have a little look if the Northern Lights actually happens. Right, let's have a look. Forest lose 3 with Chelsea, but on verge of safety because Luton obviously lost. Let's have a look at the scores. Let's have a look at the sport. So, women's boxing. League 2 playoffs. Crawley have now extended their lead over MK Dons. They're 6-1 up on aggregate. It's 3-1 at the moment. So it looks like they're going to make the League 2 playoff final. Burnley have obviously been officially relegated from the Premier League. I'm surprised Vincent Kompany's kept his job all season at Burnley. I really am. Really, really am. What's on this? Chelsea beat Nottingham Forest 3-2 away from home. but they were at 1.21 down. So Nottingham Forest could have secured their safety if they won that game, although likelihood is Luton can't overturn the goal difference, and it's all a bit. But they're still in with a fighting chance. But Chelsea, for some reason, at the end of the season, are playing really well, and they're managing to stick in things. Souths need Wayne Bennett and a stadium move to Allianz for short-term boost. That's been mentioned. The stadium. Is it a core stadium they play at? Yeah, playing where they are, it's just soulless. A lot of empty seats at games. Atmosphere isn't great. It's a difficult one. So we can just quickly look at the Premier League scores. So West Ham obviously beat Luton, and Julian Lopetegui is going to be his replacement. So David Moyes obviously is leaving. Let's have a look at the scores. Let's have a look at the scores today. Not there. Let's have a look at the scores. Right, Premier League. So Man City beat Fulham 4-0. Bournemouth, Brentford was a 2-1 win for Brentford. Everton beat Sheffield United. Newcastle Brighton was a 1-1. Tottenham beat Burnley 2-1. Burnley obviously relegated. West Ham beat Luton 3-1. Luton technically still in the Premier League, but most likely relegated. Palace won against Wolves, and Nottingham Forest lost to Chelsea. So some interesting results there. So look, the Wayne Bennett situation. I mean, he's also been linked with a move to the Eels, Parramatta as well. Parramatta have had a very poor mixed start to their season, a lot of injuries and up and down performances. But Wayne Bennett's nearly 75, 3-year deals being muted on the table. I don't think Wayne Bennett. Wayne Bennett, you're talking about a guy who could have retired about 10 years ago. If he was working in a normal workplace, fucking bugs. If he was working in a normal workplace, Wayne Bennett's retired. So, you're talking about, he's a veteran coach. He's won the most games. He's coached the most games. Obviously, he's won all these grand finals or coached teams to grand finals. There's no doubt on his importance to rugby league and the NRL. And of course, the national side with both Australia and England, and obviously Queensland as well. He's in Great Britain. He's coached at international level. He's coached at Origin level. He's the Dolphins this season. Really fantastic start, playing better than last season. Some people's underdogs potentially for a run for the grand final. Obviously, Christian Wolf takes over there next season, so we know that he's not going to be at the Dolphins next year. He doesn't want to go into a director of coaching or director of football operations kind of role. We know that if he is going to take a job, he's going to want to be a coach. He doesn't want to sit back behind the scenes doing admin stuff, basically, and solely recruitment. So he doesn't want a job with the NRL, even with expansion on the horizon. Although I could see him, if the expansion happens in the next year, I could see him potentially going to the expansion team instead. We've had a lot of rumours, verbal agreements. Nothing's actually been officially signed. And Ben Hornby is his former captain at the Dragons. So there's a whole bit of irony here that with all this talk about Wayne Bennett and what's happening at Souths, is actually undermining the guy currently trying to hold things together at the Souths. There's no doubt on what he did with an average Broncos side in his second spell, and what he did with Souths getting into a grand final when they had some bad defeats in there. They shipped 50 points more than once. But then the drop-off has been very, very pronounced. A lot of the issues that Souths are facing right now are partly Wayne Bennett caused issues in regards to the roster, some of the contracts players are on, the makeup of the team. Obviously players coming off contract. Some players actually, their contracts run out when he was still there and weren't renewed for the Demetrio era. So there's definitely been errors made in regards to the roster management, player development. and such. I feel Lockie Ilias has been given a bad hand. Obviously, demoted to reserve grade, breaks his leg, and now told, "Oh yeah, by the way, when you recover from your injury, we don't want you next season." That's an issue there. But there's a lot. I don't think Wayne Bennett is going to be the sole fix for this team, even in the medium term. I think I just don't know. I don't think it's going to work this time. I think there's a lot more to this than bring in the super coach. He's going to fix everything. Am I enjoying it? Yes, to a point. Although working outdoors in it is not as pleasant as you would think. Although it's not as hot as 2 years ago, I will give it that. It's not as hot as 2 years ago, but the humidity is the problem. Although last summer wasn't particularly unpleasant. It rained a lot, but it didn't get very cold. Humidity was an issue. Not as many insects as last year or the year before so far. I haven't been bitten to buggery yet, which is nice. Yeah, 2018 was horrible. Working outdoors in that and in grow houses. So those grow tunnels. I was working on a farm. Working in them was brutal. 2019 was brutal, and I was working outdoors in that. 2020 was brutal, working outdoors in that. Had heat stroke more than once. I had heat stroke in 2019 working at. I was helping a mate out with his garden, and I keeled over. I worked the hottest day of 2022. I actually worked that day, and yeah, that was brutal, absolutely brutal. So yeah, 2021 was a bit less brutal, but yeah, 2022 was just ridiculous. I've actually remember filming the last time it rained in 2022 properly. I've got a big moth in here. It's going to piss me off, big bug. But no, last year wasn't too bad, but then we had that secondary little heat wave in August and September. That was horrible because it was late in the summer and suddenly it was very humid. But I've worked the hottest 5 days in the country's history, and the hottest 10 days in my lifetime, I've worked them. So yeah, it was 2 years ago. It was absolutely brutal. I have a feeling that maybe not so much the beginning of June, but the second half of June, July, and into August are going to be equally as brutal. I honestly do. Obviously, the weather next week is meant to be a bit more unsettled. We've got a weather warning for thunderstorms from now until Tuesday. So the humidity's there. Temperatures will drop slightly, but the thunderstorm we had at the beginning of the month was ridiculous. I've got a funny feeling that once this changeable period of the next week or so is out the way, temperatures are going to climb again into at least the 30s, high 20s, low 30s, and then I think we could potentially have another really, really lengthy hot spell. I think we could see another 2018, 2019, 2000, or like 2003 and 2006 were brutal summers as well. No, I'm not allowed to wear shorts, although we do sort of break the rules but get away with it with our tops, cutting the sleeves off and making them into sort of tank tops, homemade tank tops. We sort of bend the rules a little bit. We're not really going to do that, but we just cut the sleeves off. We're not allowed to wear shorts, no. I wish we were, but no, we're not allowed to wear shorts because health and safety says no. And the council say no. And company policy says no. But we do cut the sleeves off with this bloody fucking moth. Piss off. We're not really allowed to wear shorts, no. We don't. But we do cheat with our tops. Sometimes some of the lads have actually worked topless before in the job. Just take the top off. And we're sort of allowed to get away with it, but officially we're not, but we sort of are. But unfortunately, the health and safety guy is coming next month. And I've got 2 weeks off, so I intend to take my 2 weeks off in the second half of the month. The Euros are on, but we've got the health and safety guy, and he will be really hot on the health and safety. But we will sort of be given the heads up that he's going to be watching us. So there's a lot of politics going on at work at the moment, and potential for people to get suspended and sacked at the moment. But at the end of the day, I think what I mean, I know it's not work related, but but sports wise, yeah, the Olympics is going to be in the middle of summer. Tour de France. We've got Wimbledon, the French Open, the Euros. We've got some major sporting events taking place this summer, and we've seen with the Rugby Union World Cup in France last year. We had that end of August, beginning of September. We had that hot weather, and in France, it was still in 30 degrees Celsius range, or high 90s, low hundreds Fahrenheit. They were having water breaks. I believe we saw it 2018 at the World Cup in Russia. There were water breaks. So we've seen it happen before where the weather has impacted sport, and we've seen it in motorsport where drivers on the radio have reported, hey, it's getting above 50, 60, 70 degrees. I mean, sometimes in the NASCAR and the endurance races, especially, that they're on the radio, and they might do a double stint. For example, the NASCAR. I think the longest NASCAR race went for over 6 hours one year at Indianapolis. There were multiple yellow flag periods, and you got on the radio. Oh, it's getting hot in here. Endurance racing, you might do a double or triple stint in the IMSA or World Endurance Championship. And especially at Le Mans, for example, it's a 24-hour race. Daytona is a 24-hour race. You've got Petit Le Mans, which I think is 10 hours. You've got Sebring's 12 hours. So there's some long races in the endurance series. And you'll hear the drivers on the radio going, it's getting hot in here. We're talking 50, 60 plus degrees Celsius inside the car. And to maximize horsepower, they turn the aircon off. So they try with these coolant vests and dry ice and having the air vents. They try various things without using aircon, because aircon uses horsepower and also the aircon gas. And they'll just, if you have it on for 24 hours straight, that would just run out. But yeah, drivers have reported some. I wouldn't say so much in endurance racing. It's all about reliability. Or having the least unreliable car, because there are some endurance races where the car is literally held together with gaffer tape and cable ties, and you might be down on a cylinder, or you've got a misfire, or the balance isn't quite right. There's a little gremlin where you've got to work around. There's a lot of racing is actually about driver skill, especially if you're in a single make series. A lot of driver skill does come into it. F1 not so much, but then you look at some of the other categories of racing, the rules are there to create balance. There's less driver aids. So when we're talking about endurance racing, there's no push to pass. The hybrids work differently in those engines where, you don't have that push to pass. You don't have DRS where the wing opens up. Don't have that. You do not have that. F1, I think those regs have ruined it. Touring cars now, especially the BTCC with the push to pass hybrid, ruins it. I wish the BTCC had the same hybrid system as what they have in World Endurance and IMSA in top class endurance racing. What you see in LMP2, it's down to chassis design. So the engines are all the same Gibson V8. Also, the LMP3 categories, they have the same V8 across all of them. Again, down to just chassis and setup. That's it. The body panels are all done in factory where the chassis is for setup. You're allowed to have different wing configurations for more or less downforce. That's a team decision. That's again to do with setup, but all the cars are basically the same, down to driver. And also your driver lineup. So you'll have different levels of quality of driving with experience or talent. And some of them are younger, some are older, and they're categorized as platinum, gold, silver, and bronze. Some of the bronze drivers potentially are those like ex-professionals or club drivers. Then the silvers are generally the younger drivers. The golds and the platinums depends on what categories they've raced in outside of endurance racing. Sometimes you've got to have a minimum of X amount of bronze or silver drivers, or gold or platinums. You have to have a mixed lineup. That's why you have the professional class, pro-am, and amateur class. It's just, I'm not a fan of the gentleman drivers because they are a menace unto themselves. That's one thing I would change about endurance racing is get rid of those gentleman drivers because they are the driving standards really make you go, and they're allowed behind how much horsepower the car. Do I think it's elitist? I think there could be more done to get those from, I wouldn't say, I hate the term disadvantaged backgrounds, but from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, from lesser means involved in motorsport, be it drivers, engineers, pit crew, management, whatever it may be. But it's an expensive sport. It's not cheap. It's not cheap to get your racing license. It's not cheap to, to take part, even as a club member. It's not cheap. Go-karting is a good way to go, though. I wouldn't say golf is actually as elitist as you think. I think that's a stereotype in the media. I know a lot of golf clubs are now relaxing their membership rules. And, of course, there is that pay-to-play element. I think it is as elitist as it is portrayed. I used to work at a golf club, so a golf course, golf club complex. I don't think it is as elitist as people think. A lot of my work colleagues play golf, so I don't think it is as elitist as people think it is. Same with cricket, same with rugby union. There's a perception that all rugby union players went to posh boarding school, and all golfers are, wealthy, got pretty cushy jobs in the city in finance. That's not the case. I would say a lot of them do. I know in the US there's a collegiate system which feeds into the PGA and now LIV Golf, where there are on the NCAA programs golf programs. No, I don't. Euro Trash? Did you say Euro Trash? Euro Trash was a great program in the 90s on Channel 4 that was a bit naughty, that had full nudity on, which was just a little bit sleazy. Eurovision shite. Euro Trash was good, though. With that annoying French guy, it had Lola Ferrari in it as well with the big boobies. And that was kind of like a cheeky teenage wank, basically, was Euro Trash. Eurovision, however, is shit. It's shit. Shit. I don't know how many times I can say shit in a sentence. And it used to be a bit of a staple in our household until about, oh shit, when did we, oh god, no, actually, what I think, as a kid growing up, I think we stopped watching it in the early 2000s. My mum, me, my sister, I think I moved out in the early 2000s. My stepdad was never really a fan of it. And then my little brother came along, and of course he had a few health issues, and I was going to and from boarding school, so I wasn't really at home a lot of the time. And the time of year it's on, it was exam season and school trip season. So for me, I stopped watching around 2003, 2004. And yes, people do still watch it, apparently so. I don't know why, but people do. It's very popular in Central Europe. Germany and Scandinavia, it's quite popular, which is deeply troubling because they're actually kind of cool countries. And then you find out that they really, really have a hard on for Eurovision. It's just weird. But no, I don't watch it. I don't really watch programs like that. It's not really my thing. Not really my thing at all. The only time I watch TV now is if I'm around someone's house and either there's sport on, or potentially a good film, or documentary series, really. And we're talking military documentaries, historical documentaries, or I like Forged in Fire and anything to do with engineering, really. Other than that, no, it's not my thing. Live music isn't my thing. I don't go to gigs. I've been to a few. I don't do festivals because who wants to spend 5 days covered in human shit in the rain? That's the thing. People just, festivals aren't really my thing. I don't even go to, I worked in a comedy club for a while and I saw some really bad stand-up comics and some really overrated stand-up comics because people rave about people like Lee Evans and other high-profile comedians. A lot of them are really, really, really not that good. What David Attenborough's Planet Earth? I mean, look, you can get that on Netflix, by the way, and it's on YouTube, so you don't actually need to go on the TV. It's all online. I do like watching my nature documentaries, yes, but I find them getting a bit cheesy now and a bit dumbed down, if that's a good word. I think the TV we're watching now has been a bit dumbed down in the last 10, 15 or so years. I'm not a I mean, the fact that Big Brother's come back for a third time. 3 times they have now made Big Brother on 3 different iterations of Big Brother. They keep making it. Why? It's like Love Island. I mean, I call that brain rot. I think that's the state of modern media. It's dumbed down. Like The Only Way is Essex. You've got Geordie Shore. I'd rather put a cordless drill through my head. Honestly, I'd rather shove a cordless drill through my head and give myself my own homemade lobotomy than watch that. I mean, I liked Big Brother in the beginning because it was kind of funny. In the late 90s, early 2000s, we found it quite funny. But as time went on, it just became crap. And I'm being honest. I watched a lot of it for about the first 5-6 years, and then I realised this is shit. As I got older, I went, this is how can people watch this? And I'm thinking about how can people actually watch this? As I got older, I went, okay, now this is getting kind of concerning that people actually see this as a potential entry into a career path. So even before we had social media, we sort of had social media when it came to things like Big Brother. And while a few contestants have actually made a decent media career out of it and done reasonably well out of it, Britain's got most of them. I mean, one of the properties I do on the bins, she was an ex-Big Brother contestant. And I think she became a glamour model and she's had a lot of work done, a lot of body modification. Let's just say her boobs aren't hers, her lips aren't hers, and her arse isn't hers. I'm not even sure her hair's hers at this point. I don't even know which series she appeared in. She's very friendly, mind, and she's not, I wouldn't say thick's the right way. She's not like unintelligent. I think she actually has a very decent day job now. I think she actually still is a glamour model, but do her bins. Yeah, I don't even remember her name, but she made well, X Factor. Oh God, I remember when X Factor was actually called Pop Idol. There you go. I'm that old. And again, this is the TV companies coming up. I remember the best reality TV program was a bit like Big Brother, but it was on the BBC. It was called Castaway, and this is how Ben Fogle got famous. Ben Fogle, they stuck him on an island in the middle of Scotland in the Hebrides for a year, and Ben Fogle got very famous. And they had a video diary thing, and it was completely different to Big Brother. It was like, we're going to stick these people up, and it was actually really, really good. But Big Brother was a bit more short, sharp, punchy. A couple of months. This was a whole year. Big Brother was more entertaining, whereas Castaway was a little bit more depressing, long-winded, but also equally as interesting. It appealed to a different potential audience. But again, these were both novel concepts at the time. But looking back at it, I'm kind of glad I don't now. I mean, they were a product of their time in a small snapshot. They had great viewership figures, made the production companies a lot of money, made some people very, very famous, very, very, very famous, launched some careers for some, and also resurrected the presenting careers and the media careers of those presenting the shows for others. But now, all these years later, you can see that it's had its day, yet they keep churning out the same crap. Yes, TV in the early 2000s, late 90s was far superior. Well, when did You Been Framed become framed? You Been Framed was, oh God. You've Been Framed. There's a similar named program on US TV that's still going. I think it's called America's Funniest Home Videos or something. That came along in the early 90s with Jeremy Beadle. And I think that ran its course. I don't think that's even on TV anymore, You've Been Framed. I think it finished a couple of years ago. But ITV realised the viewership figures weren't as good. It wasn't as popular. And you can find all those kind of fail videos on YouTube. I think the rise of YouTube, and when Harry Hilt, the bird from Emmerdale was on it. He plays on the Dingle. She was on it, and I forget her name. And she was very, very good. It was when Jeremy Beadle's health started to fail. One of the actresses from Emmerdale, which is another ITV program, did the show for a while. She was quite good and she was quite funny. She was that lovely northern, bit of a curvy northern lass, and she had a very good demeanour. And it was quite a good format with her doing it. But when Harry Hill took over, it wasn't as good. But ITV has this competition with BBC and to a certain extent Channel 4 and even now Channel 5 for game shows. And as more channels now are trying to, target that game shows, we are quite good at producing them. I know this is now we've gone off sport, but Question of Sport is now reaching its end. It's going to be gone from our TV screens soon, but they kept fiddling with that. BBC ruined Question of Sport. Wouldn't be surprised if ITV or Channel 5 pick it up at some point. Well, we can still ask sporting questions, but we are now going off topic, and we're now talking about reality TV and the shite that general TV actually is, because primetime TV is now a pile of wank, and I'm saying that with a tongue in cheek because I don't watch TV anymore. I really don't. Manchester City, don't like them. We've discussed the possibility that Tottenham may or may not let them win. And how would I feel about that? Look, as I said when that question was posed a lot earlier in the stream, honestly, I expect effort from the team I'm supporting. If I'm paying my hard-earned money to watch a game, I expect my team to at least put some effort in. So there's that. Will Olympiacos winning the Conference League be better story than Leverkusen doing the treble? I want to see Leverkusen go the entire season unbeaten. Sorry, I was born near Leverkusen. The town I used to live in, which is up the road from where I live now, is twinned with Leverkusen, so there's a community link. I want to see Leverkusen do it. Xabi Alonso will go down in history. Olympiacos, while they've made this final, I think Leverkusen are going to be a step up for them. But Leverkusen have also got to win the German Cup final yet as well. But I want to see Leverkusen do an unbeaten season and do a treble. They haven't actually completed the treble yet. They've only got 1 out of 3. They've got to play the German Cup final yet. Although they are the Bundesliga side playing Kaiserslautern, who are a Bundesliga 2 side, so it's heavily weighted in their favour they win that. And Olympiacos, the Greek league, is not necessarily as a higher standard as the German league. But I'm trying to remember, is Olympiacos Piraeus and Panathinaikos Athens? Because that could be interesting for the security aspect of it, because there's a lot of Atalanta. Olympiacos? Well, yeah, Bayer Leverkusen do refuse to lose. Yes. Olympiacos Fiorentina, that could be interesting. And Fiorentina, that's back-to-back finals and back-to-back years. And Fiorentina are the only team in Europe to have competed in all 4 major UEFA sanctioned finals in history. So we're talking European Cup / Champions League. We're talking old UEFA Cup, Europa League. We're now talking the Europa Conference League and the old Cup Winners' Cup. They're the only club in Europe to do such a thing. Real Madrid would never end up in the Conference League. Can't see it happening. So Fiorentina have got a unique little record. Leverkusen led Atalanta. Ooh. Jesus. Atalanta should not be underestimated. Atalanta are a pretty good side. Aren't all Invincibles need to go quiet if they do an unbeaten season in all competition? Absolutely. I don't think it's ever been done before. I don't think it's ever been done before in football that you don't lose a single game at all in all comps. Don't think it's been done. Honestly, I don't think it's been done ever. That is ridiculous, and Xabi Alonso deserves a lot of credit for what he's done. the fact he turned down the Liverpool job, even before they'd won um, any Bundesliga or got to the German Cup final or made even I think when Klopp made his decision to stand down, I think the group stages in Europe had just finished. Leverkusen still had a good commanding lead in the German league, and it was the early stages of the German Cup. So the fact he decided to say no, win the league title, get to 2 cup finals, and they could do a whole treble and go unbeaten, says a lot about his character as well. A lot about his character. I don't think we would see it ever again, though, if they do it. Well, I do also want Olympiacos to win as well, because that'd be fantastic. I want Olympiacos to win as well. That'd be brilliant. But then I like Atalanta. I'm really torn over this European fight. All the European. I want to see Dortmund win the Champions League. I want to see Leverkusen go an entire season unbeaten, even if that means beating Atalanta, my favourite Italian team. And I want to see Olympiacos win a European title, because that really then buggers the European Super League argument. Because the only team as part of that European Super League plan is Real Madrid. Out of the 6 that have made, the 6 that have made the European finals this season, only Real Madrid were actually officially in the Super League. Borussia Dortmund refused to join the Super League, play Real Madrid. So I want Dortmund to beat Madrid, partly because, again, I used to live near Dortmund. I used to live in that Leverkusen Dortmund area of West Germany. Weird that. So I want to see Dortmund win the Champions League because I like them. And also they turned down the Super League and said no. I want to see Leverkusen go unbeaten, but that means beating Atalanta, my favourite Italian side, and I want to see Olympiacos do it for Greece. But at the same time, I like Fiorentina. So the only team I don't want to see do well in these European finals is Real Madrid. So I'm like 99.9% of the world's population. Well, Real Madrid like to get favourable refereeing. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some match fixing allegations about Real Madrid, because we know there's Barcelona bribe referees, so I wouldn't surprise if Real Madrid were doing it as well. Jude Bellingham is very likable, but Sancho basically telling Ten Hag to do one and then making a Champions League final is equally as bizarre. And they're both trying to compete for a similar spot in the England squad with Gareth Southgate. So there's that little subplot behind the scenes. No, I think Dortmund actually relish being the underdog this season. I really do. I really do think Dortmund like being the underdog. And it's a one-off game. Anything can happen. It's at Wembley. And I think Dortmund want to overturn what happened last time they played at Wembley in the Champions League final, which was against Bayern Munich. And I watched that game. That was the last Champions League final. That was the second last Champions League final on ITV, because the last one was Real Madrid Atletico Madrid in 2014. So yeah, I think they want to avenge 2013. They want to win it again, and there's an opportunity for 2 of the 3 European finals to be won by German clubs. There's an opportunity for 2 Italian clubs to win. It's a very Mediterranean feel to these European finals, though. Do I think Sir Jim Radcliffe will get rid of Ten Hag? Yeah, I can't see Ten Hag staying in that position much longer. Since they squeaked through against Coventry with a bit of refereeing assistance, their form hasn't been great in the league. They had that heavy defeat to Palace. I can. There's already a lot of rumours circulating that he's a lame duck. The 4th team in England can't beat the 4th team in Greece. Let's not call it the Farmers League. I will say this: the players look tired in every game since, I would say, about the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, 4th round of the FA Cup. The Championship teams and the Premier League teams looked dead on their feet. It was very obvious in a lot of the FA Cup games towards the end of the season that I watched, that players looked absolutely out on their feet by around the 60-minute mark. I'm not saying the players are not fit and they're not training hard and they're not at the peak of performance, but they looked absolutely shattered. in some of the more recent FA Cup ties that I've watched. Absolutely dead on their feet. I can see a lot of fatigue impacting the Euros as well, especially with the heat. The heat humidity is going to take a massive impact. I do have concerns about the new Champions League format and the other European Conference League and Europa League also impacting players. I'm not happy, but replays are going, but I'm not, we have to just grin and bear it. We can have our views on FA Cup replays. We can have our views on the fixture congestion. And then also, you look at, I can't remember, is it Newcastle? Who are Newcastle playing in a friendly 3 days after the season ends? Is it Newcastle Villa are playing a friendly or something? Or 3 days after the season ends? They're going off to play a friendly in a Asian country or something? That doesn't. They vote to get rid of replays, but they want to. It's just, I don't know. No French clubs are making. No Portuguese clubs are there. Only one Greek club is from the lesser European leagues. It's still the same leagues making the European finals. You've got Italy with 2 teams, Germany with 2 teams, and Spain with a team in 3 finals. Only one team from outside the big 6, because I include Holland in that, because there was a few Dutch clubs in recent years that have made European finals. The Conference League isn't actually truly working, because while a Greek club has made the final this year, the Europa League isn't truly working. Technically having the group stages in the Champions League isn't truly working as intended, because the same clubs keep making the final or the semi-finals, the latter stages. The same leagues keep dominating these competitions. So to me, it's nice to see a club like Olympiacos, a club like Atalanta, a club like Fiorentina, who've gone through their tough times as well, make European finals. Leverkusen. Some of these clubs have made finals before, won silverware in Europe before, like Fiorentina, like Leverkusen. So I'm not saying they shouldn't be there, but it's been a long time between drinks. Olympiacos making European final is absolutely fantastic. Other than that, only one new finalist out of 6. The other 5 teams have all made European finals before and had success in Europe before. So only one new finalist. That to me is not good. I think the last was it crikey, was it Malmo is the other Scandinavian. I think Malmo is the only Scandinavian finalist in a European competition, I think. So it is concerning that we're not seeing other clubs make their first final in Europe. It is a shame. It is a shame that Dortmund have been in multiple Champions League finals. Obviously, Real Madrid have basically owned the competition. Leverkusen have appeared in finals before. Atalanta have appeared in finals before. Fiorentina, their second back-to-back finals. So the same clubs are reappearing, the same leagues. It doesn't matter that the Premier League clubs this season are having a bit of a off year. Several clubs made semi-finals and quarter-finals. Let's not pretend they didn't get far in tournaments. Let's not buy into it. It's just, okay, wow, they're not part of the last 4. It's not a big deal. Real Madrid are lucky to have made the final. Let's be honest, Real Madrid actually were lucky to make this final. We could be saying, well, they're the only Spanish club this year. So there is that. The last time we saw a minnow win a European trophy was Galatasaray. I wouldn't say the Turkish are minnows. I think that's media. And I think UEFA have also slightly buggered the UEFA coefficient, but I wouldn't call them a minnow. Galatasaray have a massive following, quite a successful club, and there's a reason why Istanbul regularly hosts European finals. So I wouldn't say they're a minnow. Still, not only did they make a final, they won a trophy, yes, but Steaua Bucharest done it. I can't remember if it was Red Star Belgrade. FC Magdeburg from East Germany have won a European trophy. I mean, so when we say minnow, I mean, no. I mean, when you're playing in your country's top flight and you make a European final, I wouldn't class that club as a minnow at all. The last time we saw a minnow, dude, I think we'll win the Euros. Well, I did my group preview. Some of the groups are groups of death. We are going to see at least one or two big nations fail to get out the group stage. We're going to see some big nations fall in the second round. We've got some debutants in there in Georgia, and we've got some teams like Romania, for example, making a long-awaited return to the international tournament stage. I think it's too close to call. I think there's a lot of teams in transition. There's a lot of coaches under pressure. And it's a lot of unknowns. The weather, I think, the weather conditions are going to have a massive impact. I think it's going to be very, very hot, very, very humid. And of course, a month is a long time. Well, a month isn't a long time, but is a long time. So in this context, a month is a long time. We've still got the end of the European seasons to play out. With the 3 European finals and the domestic seasons winding down, there could be injuries. So what we could say, line up on paper now, next week or the week after, scrap that lineup because a player's broken his leg, or a player's torn his hamstring, or he's done his ankle, or he's dislocated something, or something's not right. And then we could have a player fail of drugs. Anything can happen. We could get a player suspended, fail a doping test, get injured, announce their retirement, a shock retirement. I don't want to play anymore. So a lot can happen between now and the Euros that start in literally just over a month's time. A lot can happen. I really think until we actually have the final squads announced and players get through training and actually get out into camp training in Germany, until those squads are actually landed in Germany and started their first tournament training sessions, too early to tell. And until we see each opening fixture for each team, I think it's too early to tell. Far too early to tell. Well, Shakhtar and Zenit, I don't think Eastern Europe will never win again. But I do think now with the new spending rules, I think that potentially with these new spending rules coming in and how they're going to be interpreted by each of the domestic leagues, potentially we could see the romance return a little bit. And there is this resistance to the European Super League, and I think there is the potential for Conference League and Europa League. This is where I say bring back the Cup Winners' Cup personally, because it re-incentivises domestic cup competitions that have been weakened and de-incentivised. And we get more fairy tale stories like an FC Magdeburg or a Atalanta or something along those lines, or a Fiorentina or something like that, going on getting to a European final, which was not expected at the start of a season. But I think we've gone too far the other way. I don't think the Cup Winners' Cup is going to make a return, although I think it should. And I think scrapping the UEFA coefficient, for God's sakes, because that does more harm than good, but could see success from the eastern side of Europe again. I wouldn't rule it out. The fact that Georgia have qualified for a major international tournament and Albania have qualified alongside them, I wouldn't rule it out. That club success could occur from Eastern and Europe and Scandinavia. Wouldn't rule it out. Would not rule it out at all. Do I think League Cup is in danger? The EFL will try and hold on to it as long as possible, and the Football League trophy as well. But again, it's a handful of Premier League clubs are basically trying to get their own way, and the FA are weak. So, but it's not an FA sanctioned competition; it's a Football League sanctioned competition. So, we shall see. And of course, all 72 members of the Football League and the Premier, plus the 20 members of the Premier League, have basically a say in how the League Cup format is run. So, the Premier League won't have a majority in that regard. What a salary cap? Well, 3 teams resisted it. Man United being one of them. I wouldn't be surprised if Man City and Liverpool were the other 2. But look, League One and League Two out during the COVID pandemic and say, look, we need a salary cap. This is going to kill us. The Championship ended up backing League One and League Two in regards to revenue sharing, which the Premier League, again, a handful of clubs were holding it up, and nearly led to a complete breakdown of the footballing pyramid. And so I think the tide is turning, and also we're now seeing changes to the spending rules across Europe, and a lot of the European clubs have a lot less turnover than the Super League clubs. I think is the best way to look at it. So I think we are starting to see a turn of the tide now, and while fans think, oh, the league's going to suffer as a result, I think the other European leagues will look at this and go, hang on a second, we need to follow suit. I think what is interesting is the players, the PFA, haven't really stuck their nose in this one. I think they're trying to link it to club revenues, but I do think a flat cap would work better. I think certain admin members have realised actually Man City winning all the time, turning it into like what Bayern Munich have done to the Bundesliga is a bad thing, and not necessarily good for the game. You look at the club histories I've done on the European leagues and how actually surprising it is that how competitive some of these leagues actually are historically. Like the Swiss league and the German league are far more competitive than people realise. When I get into the French league properly, you'll see how competitive the French league is. When we get into, I've still got to go to a few big clubs in Portugal and Spain as well. The Italian league is I've got to do the video on Parma in Italy because that will surprise people how that 10-year period in the 90s to the 2000s and then suddenly they run out of money. They were very successful. They won a lot of trophies in a very short space of time before the money issues. So to be fair, people will be surprised by how competitive some leagues actually are. The Norwegian league is going to be fun to really delve into. The Swedish league is going to be fun to fully delve into. The Austrian league is going to be a lot of fun. And then we'll get to Poland and the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and then we'll start going across. One of my friends is the Levski Sofia fan, so I'm going to look at the Bulgarian league at some point. We're going to look at the Romanian league. Steaua Bucharest are no longer the dominant force in Romania. They obviously won a Champions League. We're going to look at the Turkish league because Fenerbahce, Galatasaray, Besiktas. There's some other big clubs in Turkey. That's kind of interesting. There's a lot of leagues to look at, and then South American leagues as well. We've got Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Chile, Colombia. We've got obviously the Liga MX in Mexico. There's some fun ones to look at. The MLS, I can do some more content on the MLS. I think could definitely look at that. But of course, the league structure in the MLS is significantly different because it's a franchise model. But we can do some more content on the MLS. Absolutely, we can look at that. But I want to have fun with the European leagues. There's some interesting clubs in the second and third tiers of leagues that have had success historically. There's still a lot of clubs in Italy I want to do before I get to AC Milan, Inter Milan, and Juventus. There's obviously, before I get to Bayern Munich, there's a lot of clubs in Germany I want to do as well. History's on. I want to do more Danish football clubs, Sweden, Norway. And then I want to look at the League of Ireland as well, the Irish League, like Cork City and some of the clubs in Northern Ireland as well. That's going to be a lot of fun. I've got a few subscribers. I've got a lot of subscribers from Ireland. I need to do some more Irish content, so I'm going to look at the Irish League. That's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Doesn't get a lot of coverage. Doesn't get a lot of attention. But Cork City, for example. Got to do a video on them, and then we'll just go around the Irish League and the Northern Irish League system. Holland, Belgium, even Luxembourg. I want to do the Luxembourg League because that could be a lot of fun. So there's definitely a lot of clubs and a lot of leagues I've got to look at, and that can keep me busy. And some of these lesser known clubs, they don't get a lot of attention. People don't do a lot of videos on them, a lot of discussion about them, but they're thoroughly interesting. And then you look how competitive each individual league structure is, and who wins all the titles, who wins all the domestic cups, who qualifies for Europe, that kind of thing. Who's had success in these competitions, how far they've gone, record transfers, crowds, stadiums. It gets kind of fun when you start digging and looking. And yeah, we the Football League, the founding of the Football League, but basically the FA gives us this great global game that in a month's time we have, one of the second biggest international football tournament in the world taking place not that far from here in Germany. Germany's not that far. It's a couple hours flight. What are we talking about? 5 hours, 6 hours driving plus a ferry journey, maybe 7 hours driving and a ferry journey, depending on where you are. You're in, Germany. So it's not a million miles away. I think, since 1945, we're all friends again. But I think the Bundesliga is surprisingly underrated as a competitive league because Bayern Munich has won it so many times in the last decade or so. But I look at it and there's a lot of silverware distributed around a lot of clubs in Germany. What clubs in Japan and South Korea? It could be interesting, yes. I haven't considered it at this point because I just don't think I would have the audience for it necessarily. And I haven't really ever followed Japanese or Korean football, really. Their best players end up playing over here in Europe. And they're scouted from a reasonably young age. If they're talented enough, they get scouted, end up in Europe anyway, or North America playing. And so, while it could be an interesting little rabbit hole to go down, not really something that has crossed my mind up to this point. Well, Bursaspor, yeah. Well, there's a lot of corruption in Turkish football as well, and finances can be precarious. But there's a lot of clubs in Turkey with some funky names and some great histories and trophy cabinets. More than just Fenerbahce, Besiktas, Galatasaray. There's a lot of clubs in Turkey. Some really interesting clubs in Turkey, and going to be a lot of fun when we get to Turkey. But there's like the rest of Eastern Europe to get through yet. I want to look at the Polish league because that looks like a lot of fun. A lot of fun. One of my friends is a Gdansk, Legia Gdansk fan because he's from Gdansk. And so there you go. Yeah, I mean that they only need one more point to secure the title. But it's a lot closer this year, the title running, than in previous years between the two. But it would be refreshing and interesting to see a different team out, win the Scottish title. Yeah, I think the old firm is overplayed. I think the Scottish League is not as strong as it could be at this point. But it is what it is. I started to get interested in Scottish football a few years ago. I did a lot of videos on it, partly out of interest and partly for the channel. I've got a lot of Scottish subscribers and viewers. I've done a lot of the history of Scottish clubs. I do need to do Celtic at some point. I need to do a few other clubs in the top two tiers, and then we'll get to the lesser clubs in Scotland. They'll be fun to look at, like your Stenhouse Mules and your Alloa Athletics and your Brecon Cities and things like that. Well, when we get to that level, I mean, I'm really starting to scrape the barrel of professional clubs and semi-pro clubs at this point. But now that Bromley have got promoted, I can do a video on Bromley. So there we go. And Solihull Moors and Yeovil Town. They're the next ones on my UK kind of and Queen of the South They're the ones on my to-do list when it comes to UK clubs. But I want to look at a few more clubs in Germany. I want to start looking at some clubs in Greece. I've got Parma to do. I've got Deportivo La Coruña and Deportivo Alves to do in Spain, as on my to-do list of reasonable-sized clubs in Spain. I've got Benfica to do in Portugal, and a few other clubs in Portugal that I think will definitely get some good views and attract some interest. Rayo Vallecano in Spain, Mallorca in Spain as well. I think I'm not sure if I've done Getafe yet. I might not have, but I've done Villarreal. And oh God, I'm trying to think. There's a few clubs I haven't done in Spain yet that are reasonably well known and successful. But I need to do Bromley. I need to do Solihull Moors. That's 2 playoff finals they've lost in 3 seasons. So tough being a Solihull Moors fan, and they're a very, very young club as well. So I want to see how quickly they've gone through the promotions and gone up the levels. People usually assume the SPL is just Celtic and Rangers, where you have teams like Hearts, Aberdeen, Kilmarnock, Hibs. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of historical clubs. I've done most of them up to this point, but that one major silverware in Scotland. Haven't done Celtic yet. I try and leave those bigger clubs with just trophy cabinets out their arse, where they're just running out places to put all the silverware off as long as possible. I want to focus on some of the lesser known clubs or slightly less successful clubs that make up a league system. I feel sorry. You've got to feel sorry for Solihull Moors. You really do. We need more London clubs. Well, there's a fair few that aren't even in the Football League. So, God, you could have a league system on your own just from London. But I've got to do a video on Bromley. At one point, the worst football club in the world, and the least successful football club in the world in regards to losing seasons and not doing very well. But they've been around for a very, very long time. Very long time. I think it's 132 years Bromley have existed. So the fact it's taken this long to make the Football League is stunning. But let's hope they can continue their rise and can stabilise in the Football League first and foremost, and then potentially go up the divisions in due course. They got to do it obviously right. They've obviously got to be sustainable. They've got to survive and keep their head above water. But it just shows how difficult it is to make the Football League, let alone bounce back to the Football League. So Solihull Moors have done in 14 years what it took. Well, Bromley have taken 132 years. So Solihull Moors have done it quite quickly to get to the level they're at. Bromley have taken a lot longer to take that next step. So they're 2 clubs I've got to do videos on. I think they would do really, really well with the view counts. Not going to lie. But there's some other clubs that I need to do, like Altrincham, Gateshead. They keep coming up in conversations that I have. Yeah, but then again, you've also got the home counties as well. So you can get support from outside Greater London. I think certain areas like Essex and Kent and Surrey lack decent professional clubs of their own, have a lack of them. So yeah, I think surrounding London, there is a catchment area for London clubs when it comes to the counties and surrounding areas outside of London for potential fans as well to draw in. And again, success has a lot to do with that, and also connecting with a community. So a lot of people from Essex actually support West Ham and Leyton Orient, for example. Charlton have a lot of fans from Kent. Wimbledon actually have a lot of fans from Surrey. Arsenal and Tottenham have fans all across the home counties. Chelsea, Brentford and Fulham have a lot of fans actually from Buckinghamshire and Berkshire. So you do sort of see the catchment areas of London clubs in regards to areas outside of London where fans will also support those clubs. But no, yeah, I should definitely do a video on Solihull Moors and Bromley, and just look at the comparing the journeys of the two. Be very, very interesting. And the fact that Solihull Moors has only been going since, was it 2007, 2008, something like that, to make 2 playoff finals in the National League and be that close to Football League football in less than 15 years is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, 16 years or so, whereas Bromley took 132. So there are some, caveats, I think, and some comparisons you can do, and look at, and it'll be fun. It'll be fun to look at some of these non-league clubs. There's a lot of non-league clubs I need to do videos. I mean, then I'm really starting to scrape the barrel of clubs that are known. Then at this point we are really starting to dig deep into the barrel of British clubs. And then in Europe, I mean, once you get past the second division in a league system, then we're really starting to do people even know about these clubs? Unless you play Football Manager. If you play Football Manager for any length of time, then you might have a bit of knowledge about some of these football clubs that many fans, sports fans, would never clue about. This is where the North Americans are really truly understanding our culture. I have not done Boston United yet. They are on my to-do list, and of course their financial irregularities do stick out because they were only a Football League club for a handful of seasons. I think they spent the same amount of time in the Football League as Forest Green Rovers. I think it was about 3-4 seasons they spent in the Football League before the financial irregularities kicked in. I used to play Footy Manager as well, and I never picked. I think the only English club I actually picked to play with on Footy Manager was about 2006. I think it was in 2006, and I started to get into Football Manager again. And the only English club I played with was Barnsley. And there was a little period where I played the first ever Football Manager game in 2003. My friend let me borrow it, and I was Dover Athletic for a season. But yeah, I never really had the time to really get into it. While I wouldn't mind playing it now, I can't remember my Steam account password, and I don't really have any interest really. But it does help with the knowledge, yes. But that's what the internet's for. That's what books are for. Researching, looking up. I've got to do a video on Rushton and Diamonds because obviously they were a cult club back in the day, partly for the kit and partly for the name, and their rise and very quick fall and failure. That'd be kind of fun to do a video on. But yeah, no, I've had a lot of fun over many years. I started to get into Football Manager, got out of it, got back into it, and then got pretty bored pretty quick because I would lose too many hours in an evening playing it when I was busy with college work and then actually having an actual job, and I wasn't a student anymore, and I had to do adult things and pay tax and save up for a place to live and save up for a moped and insurance and road tax and fuel and actually being an adult. So I well, I love playing. I used to love, gaming, video games, and PC games. Yeah, I wouldn't say I grew out of it. I'm not really. I've lost a lot of interest at the moment because I feel that the video game industry is a bit of a mess at the moment, and a lot of negative headlines, and it's a bit off-putting at times when you come across these negative headlines, and also the quality of games right now. There's nothing out right now that says to me I want to play this game and buy it. I wouldn't say it gets more boring. There was a guy. I mean, a few of my friends used to work for an independent video game shop, which is online only now. Anyway, go in the store, and one day I see this old man in there, and I think, he's buying something for the grandkids or his kids. He was clearly retired, He might have had kids, like, you never know. He might have stepkids, things like that. So I think, oh, he's buying a present for his kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews, something along those lines. And then I think it was when I bought Crisis 3. And then every few weeks I would go in the store, do some trade-ins, buy some second-hand games, buy some new releases, whatever it may be. And I would see this guy regularly. And I got into a conversation with him, as did my mates who ran the shop. But I got into a conversation with him. I said, oh, your kids and grandkids must love you because you're in there a lot. He goes, no, these games aren't for them, they're for me. He was bored in retirement because his wife was a lot younger than him by about 10 or so years. So she was still working. He got bored. He had a lot of money. He had saved up his pension pots. He had a lot of money to spare. And it was his kids and grandkids that got him into gaming. He got bored. He got very, very good at it. And that was his hobby to keep him busy in the evenings, was playing video games. He would obviously do the garden. He would obviously, do other activities. But in the evening, he didn't drink, so he didn't go down the pub. And he would play the video games with his kids and grandkids. But also he played online. So he would buy the Call of Duties. He would buy Battlefields. He would buy FIFA. He would buy whatever game. Got talking to him, see him regularly. I mean, this is about 10 years ago. This guy is fully retired. So he's retired. And he was buying these games to play himself. So there are a lot of older video gamers out there. There's a lot of them are out there. And some of them have a tech background. Some of them may have actually worked in the video game industry back in the day, in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. But there's a lot of them out there who are older than the age of 50. There's one of the guys I work with is in early 50s. He's about 53, 54. He still plays Call of Duty now. Still plays it now, religiously, every night, at least 2 hours a night. Plays Call of Duty. So let that sink in. Let's let that sink in. So yeah, there's some. Yeah, it's a thing. There's a lot. I think a lot of people don't realise how many older gamers there actually are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. You mod FIFA, tells you that it's not. I haven't played FIFA. I think the last FIFA I played was 2015, 2016, something like that. Maybe 2017 might have played a quick game. I haven't played FIFA for a long time. I used to play FIFA with my mate Chris, who sadly passed away in 2016. So it's around 2016, 2017 that I last actually went, I want to play FIFA. That tells you how long it's been since I found sports games interesting, because they haven't really changed much since the 90s. It's still the same basic premise. The controls are basically the same. The gameplay is pretty similar. No, EA Games and EA Sports have gone the wrong way. It has made them a lot of money, these various sports franchises that they've released. It's made a lot of the sports teams with their license and the players with their licenses in regards to revenue sharing and what agreements they have in place for third party. It's made FIFA a lot of money. It's made NFL, NHL, all these various leagues and sports have made a lot of money out of these video game franchises. And the players within those leagues, is in regards to CBAs and negotiations they've made over their licensing, over their image licensing, have made a lot of money. Yeah, it's also got a lot of new fans involved in the actual sport as well, who wouldn't have otherwise got interested in football or rugby union or ice hockey or basketball, whatever. But EA Games and 2K and all the other, the video game industry is not in a good place right now. I personally think. I think a lot of the big studios, a lot of the big games companies aren't. It's not in a healthy state. There's been a lot of negative headlines. There's been a lot of the microtransactions, the quality on bad quality games, bugs, unfinished games, patches. There's been some big video game failures. And on the sports side of it, there's only so far you can take the gameplay, the graphics with the generation we have now. The gameplay, especially before you go, it's just the same game with some new players in it, some new characters in it. The gameplay isn't overly different. It can only go so far. It can only go so far. And I didn't dislike them. I think sometimes there's a challenge of taking a team from the bottom professional league in a game to the top professional league, or yourself creating. There is a certain challenge to that on some of the games, and but after a while, it's like, yeah, I'm not overly. Go away. I'm not overly enjoying playing this. Oh my god! Go away, moth! Go away, bloody bug! It's a fucking moth. Piss me off. But no, EA Sports and EA games in general, the servers are terrible. And the gameplay isn't overly great. They do get regularly criticised. They're not necessarily the best, I will admit. I will say that. But EA Games used to have an office in Guildford. I think they still have a subsidiary office in Guildford, one of the subsidiaries that they own in Guildford, which is not that far from me. It's only 25 minutes on the train from where I live. It's right by the right in the centre of the town. And I used to work in Guildford, and I got friends who live in Guildford, so I used to go down there quite regularly. I still do a bit of shopping in Guildford, pick up a few bits and pieces, and I used to go past their office 5 days a week, every day, going to work and going home from work. So I locally, EA Games and EA Sports have a lot of employees in the UK and a lot of them locally, and support staff locally. So and contractors. Another one of my friends, a couple of my friends work for Microsoft. One of them actually works in the Xbox division, the gaming division. And again, a lot of staff again in the UK locally, not too far from where I live. That moth is going to die. Get away from my book. Get away from my paperwork. Get away from me. I hate moths. Got him. I think I've killed him. So yeah, there is a lot of people involved in the video game industry live not in the area that I live in now. There's a lot of them involved in the video game industry. Live outside of London, but in the southeast. There's a lot around the Cambridge area. There's a lot on the in the Thames Valley, where I live, and there's also a lot in the West Midlands as well. Some of my favourite games. Oh, he's down there and he's dying. So there's a lot in the West Midlands, there's a lot around Cambridge, and there's a lot around the Thames Valley, Oxford kind of area. So basically in the area that I live now. And they contributed to a lot of these sports games that we play today and have played over many, many years. But yeah, I haven't really enjoyed FIFA for a very, very long time. I think. But and also you saw that disagreement between FIFA and EA Games over the licensing and how much they should pay and how much money they're going to make, and the relationship broke down very, very publicly. It made FIFA actually look like the good guys, but no one came out of that a winner. It wasn't a great PR relations kind of moment for either EA Games or FIFA. Or even the players and the clubs, because they make money out of the franchise. The cost of the game, the lack of quality, it was a bit of a PR nightmare and a bit of a PR disaster. Considering you've got the Pro Evo series, that's still quite a successful game series as well. You've had other footballing game series, like you've got Pro Evo. EA Games have got their EAFC, formerly FIFA. You've had UEFA Striker. You've had This Is Football series that lasted for a couple of games. There have been others, but Pro Evo and what was the FIFA series, which is now EAFC, they're the two big ones, have stood the test of time in regards to the fact that they continue to be a game series, but they're less How they're still popular, I don't know. I mean, but kids still want to play. You could argue, though, apart from video games, are younger people less interested in watching professional sport or playing sport or supporting a sports team than they were 20 years ago? Because I look at my viewership figures, and that moth is really starting to annoy me. He will die. Will die. But I look at my viewership figures on the analytics, and I look at the age range of viewers, and this is striking. I had more viewers over who are aged 55 to 65 and 45 to 55. Those brackets, more of them than 18 to 24-year-olds. So the 35 to 44 age bracket, I have more viewers in that age bracket than 18 to 24, and 13 to 17-year-olds, so teenagers, just aren't watching. And overall, if I look at the whole history of the channel, I've got more people over the age of 65 watching than under the age of 13 to 17. So we are starting to see a generational shift. And it doesn't matter if it's a big sports scandal and it's newsworthy for more than just sports news, but in general, it's a high profile sportsman or sports journalist. Again, more older people. Older people are more likely to watch TV. They're more likely to watch, sporting current affairs programs and related programming that isn't just the live sport. So they're more likely to watch highlights packages. They're more likely to watch the current affairs aspect of sports broadcasting. And so when there's like a sports program being cancelled or a format change or a journalist getting sacked or suspended, like Paul Kent with NRL 360, for example, older viewers are there. And then I look at the general viewing trends and younger people. It's a general shift now to the over 30s, basically. So basically my age range upwards. So the over 25s, over 30s, there's been a massive shift than people aged under 30. And it's been noticeable, and it's been noticeable as the channels continued with its existence. Under 25s, less people are watching. And each month, that percentage of the 18 to 24 demographic is dropping. Each month, it's getting lower. On average, it's dropping. So there has clearly been shifts in viewing habits. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not saying that young people aren't watching and participating in sporting activities, because they are, but they're not watching my channel. And the viewing figures, I think, back it up across YouTube and across sports in general, that young people just feel a slight more of a disconnect. And a lot of that's to do with the availability of free TV and also money, disposable income. To get VPNs isn't necessarily cheap. It's cheaper than paying for the subscription, but it's not necessarily cheap. And a lot of sports organisations and leagues and competitions have noticed, well, if we can actually use YouTube, we can live stream stuff, and we can actually gain an audience on top of our TV broadcasting deals. We can actually gain a social media audience with younger viewers who otherwise wouldn't be watching, subscribing, and viewing on the traditional linear media that exists through TV and internet subscriptions. So we've seen it with IMSA. We're seeing it with the IIHF, ice hockey, World Rugby. They also have YouTube. There might still be some geo blocks with certain countries, like with Great Britain, in regards to the live streams not being able to watch them. So I might have to tinker with a little VPN there. But I can watch almost every game apart from the Great Britain games on YouTube in the World Championship ice hockey, for example. But there we go. Anyway, it's now 10:30. I really appreciate all the questions we've had this evening. So yeah, just going through it all. The Northern Lights may still be visible where I am in the UK this evening. It depends on the cloud cover. So I might actually stick my head outside in a minute and see if the Northern Lights are floating around where I am in the southern half of the UK. 50% chance of getting them tonight. I did miss them last night because I fell asleep. I will do a video on Boston United. We have to look at the financial irregularities. I've mentioned them in videos before, doing other other club histories, but Boston United definitely something to look at. Also, during my research for some of the other club histories, we've come across a few very important moments. So the 1971 Bundesliga scandal, do a video on that. I think the last live stream we did, we looked through the list of sports scandals, not just match fixing, but just sports scandals across all professional sports. Found out there were a lot of match fixing scandals going back to 1915. So, and a lot of corruption scandals going back as far as 1915. So, there's a lot of video ideas for the summer to look at, which we can definitely delve into at some point. That'll be great fun. Great fun to look at the Black Sox scandal, the 1915 Britain football scandal, match fixing scandal, the 1964 match fixing scandal in England. So there's definitely a lot of video ideas that I have for these sporting scandals. That'll be kind of fun. Have a single playlist just for sports scandals, and it doesn't matter what sport it is. So I'm very keen to potentially delve in and do some videos on those topics. I've covered a few sports scandals already on the channel, but it's been a while, so definitely worth video worthy scandals to look at. But anyway, that's for another day. And that's for later on in the summer. Maybe when I have the 2 weeks off next month, before in the mornings do videos on some of these sports scandals, and then in the afternoon and the evenings watch the group stage matches of the Euros. And then when we get to the knockout stages, most of those games will be evening games anyway. I won't be able to watch all the Euros games because of work, but I intend to watch as many as possible. But from me for now, thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate all the questions. There's been some really interesting questions, interesting discussion points. Not as necessarily as interesting as the last live stream. We really went for it on the last live stream, but this one's been still pretty interesting. And I might even do a couple of match reviews tomorrow when it comes to the Ice Hockey World Championships, just because it's a Sunday. Although the British Touring Cars is at Brands Hatch tomorrow, so I might sort of juggle Touring Cars, World Championship Ice Hockey, and the 2 NRL games that are on tomorrow morning. So there's a full day of sport tomorrow, but might do some more football club history videos and delve into that. We'll do an NRL review of after round 10, looking at the table and how things are going into Magic Round. So there's some things to plan for tomorrow. Of course, Burnley getting relegated. Just smile. We could see a lot of managerial changes in the summer as well when it comes to a lot of sports teams. And we'll also hear news on Wayne Bennett, whether he goes to South Sydney and whether the Bunnies make the move and make it official. But Magic Round's coming. Let's get Magic Round out the way next week. Anyway, from me for now, thank you very much for watching, and I will have some more content for you guys very, very soon.